Welcome to the 6-Minute Stretch Challenge number 16. Today we're going to explore part 2 of our Mental Bounce Back series. In our last 6-minute stretch, we talked about the ebb and flow of mental energy due to the pandemic and how depleted we are at this point in time. Interestingly enough, this past week I saw a sign and I decided I'd take a picture of it and share it with you. And it says, "Next week has been exhausting." And that just really resonated with me because we get through each week and we're very tired. And as we look out into the next week, we already feel some of that pressure and we get very exhausted and tired along the way. So as I said, in our last session, we talked about the ebb and flow of mental energy due to the pandemic. If you were with us, you saw this slide. And we're going to focus on part 3 here because we are in the middle of the resurgence of the pandemic, where we are back on lockdown. We're back to saying to ourselves, are we ever going to get out of this? I want my old life back. This is never going to end. And that is very wearing on us. It's draining. And so what we need to do is understand it, because right now research has shown that our surge capacity may be at its lowest level. And what we need to do is renew ourselves. Before we talk about renewal, what is the surge capacity? How is it identified? Well, the definition is it's a collection of adaptive systems, both mentally and physically, that humans draw on for short-term survival. And it happens in acutely stressful situations, such as natural disasters, into pandemics. And the difference between a pandemic and a natural disaster such as a tornado, it comes and goes. And we have this period, it hits, and then there's cleanup, and there's an end to it. With the pandemic right now, there is no end to it. And unfortunately for many of us, we don't have that energy to draw upon to get us through these next 2 months, 3 months, 5 months. And so what we need to do is look at what maybe is contributing to this surge capacity being lower. One of the factors that's out there that people are talking about is ambiguity, or an ambiguous loss. So what is ambiguous loss? They talk about it being a loss that occurs without closure, without a clear understanding of what's happened. And I do believe, or what's going to happen, and I do believe that is where we are today. When is this going to end? Some examples of ambiguous losses. Maybe on the physical side, you lose a limb, you lose that arm or a leg, or maybe a family member has dementia, and we just can't see that end, and it really wears on us. And so for us, what has been what you've experienced during the pandemic as an ambiguous loss, not knowing when things are going to come back the way they used to be? Is it the loss of being with family and friends? It's a loss of your routine that you had. Maybe it was going to the office. It might have been going to the gym, a favorite restaurant. Maybe it's a ritual in your life. And the one that comes to mind for me right away are those rituals, weddings. I've had 2 nieces that have either postponed their weddings and or have taken their list from 150 and had to chop it down to 50. And so these things are really impacting our lives. And the more we look out and we don't see an end to it, the worse it's going to be for us. So the question is, what can you do about it? And as we thought about this for today's session, there were 2 things that came to mind. And of course, there are more things that we can do, but 2 things right away to be thinking about to help you build some of this resiliency in the mental side of things are as follows. One is acceptance. It's to accept that your life is not the same today. And quite honestly, not to be negative, it's probably not going to go back to the way it was 12 months ago. It can get better, but it's not going to be the exact same. So we can't continue to grasp and say, I want things the way they used to be. And one of the things that you can do is use your objectivity. And if you've been with us in these previous sessions, we've talked about reality testing. That is an emotional intelligence sub-skill that we can utilize, that you can utilize. And that's really thinking about how long does it take us to get to neutral, to be able to see things the right way, both personally and professionally. And if you recall, that is our prove it button. You just pause things long enough so you can prove what you're telling yourself, what's going on in your mind. And you can go back to challenge number 3, maybe rewatch it, because I do believe it gives you some great advice on things you can do to build that mental capacity. The second one, and this is the one that really resonated with me, good or bad, It's to reset your expectations, recalibrate your scorecard. And what we need to do is stop looking at the goals that you set prior to the pandemic, whether it's a professional metric that you had for you or your team, or a personal goal that you had for you or your family. Things have changed, and we need to have flexible optimism at this point and reframe where we are today and be more realistic about what you can and cannot do. That doesn't mean lower your standards. It's talking about your expectations. Because what I don't want you to do is to beat yourself up over negative or with negative self-talk. And that was and still is one of the biggest ones that gets in my way. It leaks my mental energy, and then it rolls into other areas from an emotional perspective and then from a physical perspective as well. And so what happened to me was I said to myself, I should be able to get more done these days. I'm home. I'm not traveling like I used to. I have more time on my hands. I can get more work projects done, more home projects done, and I should be able to help more around the house with my family. And what I have found is that's not really happened for me. Things have been exhausting. I've been mentally and physically, emotionally drained. The effect has been devastating in some respects. It's been paralyzing in others, depressing in some realms as well. And then it's just been this overall drain of energy. And it's been overall negative to me. And a lot of that is because of my self-talk, what I'm telling myself as to why I'm not getting some of these things done. And so what we really need to take a step back and do is say, what are those expectations that I have of myself? Should I change those a bit? And instead of saying, well, I get all of this done today or this week, parcel it out in smaller steps. And that's what I have found has helped me. Yes, I still beat myself up over many things, but there are different ways of looking at things. And I think if you try these two steps, it can certainly help you. So what is our challenge for this week? As always, it's growth as an individual first. Look at how you might be able to help yourself. Consider the places you feel the ambiguous loss that I just described. Recalibrate that scorecard. And then secondly, growth as a team. Take what you've learned here and maybe share it with your team, because if you're experiencing what I've just described to you, I can guarantee you your team is as well. And at the end of all these, what we say, and I'm going to challenge you here as well, is, you know what, here's challenge number 16. So it's go time. So let's do this. And I would again challenge you to do it with others, because when we collectively do it, there's a much greater chance for the best possible result.